Alright, corporate securities. Chapter 1, basic corporate structure. Corporation is created with a group of individuals engaged with the business enterprise. Assuming that four persons have formed a partnership to engage in business manufacturing women's clothing, they would partnership would be subject to certain disadvantages of the business that would continue only to the extent of the life of the partners. Partners would be personally liable for financial losses. Liability would extend beyond the investment in the partnership conceivably in danger of the person's assets. In addition, the ability of the raise of capital expansion would be limited to the abilities of the partners to contribute. For these or other reasons, partners may wish to form a corporation. Acme fashion, incorporated corporations are chartered by state, with the charters being issued by Secretary of State. In many states, procedures would begin with the filing a certificate of incorporation. Among these items, information required by the charter would be the name, address of the corporation, purpose of the information. In addition, with the obvious activities of the organization manufacturing clothing would be included with the possible future activity, for example, the purchase, sale, securities, commodities, and real estate. As a corporation cannot engage in functions that are not included in their charter, these additions would prevent need to amend the charter for some later date. A name and address of incorporators. How will the list for the name and address of foreign incorporators Axman Fashion Incorporated before would probably also be named with the officer with the members of the board of the directors of the corporation. Capital stock authorized and issued. The corporation consists of only four originators. Would authorize a small amount of the stock, perhaps 1,000 shares. Of this amount, we would issue 400 shares and 100 to each. Our shareholders would also assign per value to the shares. Par value, for the accounting purpose of it, does not necessarily relate to the true value of the shares. Upon receipt of our charter from the state, our capital structure would be Acme Fashion Incorporated common stock, authorized 1,000 shares at 10% par, and issued outstanding 400 shares, unissued 600 shares, treasury shares 0. Treasury stocks is stock that has been issued by the corporation that is later reacquired through the purchase or donation. For example, if one corporation stockholder should wish to serve as a connection, he might sell his stock back to the corporation. For small corporations, the agreement of the shareholder to repurchase the stock at the book value on the demand. Should the stock be 100 shares to be repurchased, it is known as treasury stock. The stock does not have voting rights, receiving or receive dividends while remaining in the treasury. Alright. Also would not be used the computing earning per share, which would affect the inflating earnings following such transaction capital structure. Authorized 1,000 shares at 10 par, issued overstanding 300 shares treasury stock, 100 unissued stock, 600 shares. Generally, a new corporation would issue only stock, usually called common stock. A company grows, it requires additional financing. Other securities, such as preferred stock bonding, will be added to the capital structure. Common stock. Testing. Alright, common stock ownership represents equity interest in the corporation. The holder can in many ways be compared with a general partnership. Ownership of the preferred stock also represents equity in position, but the holder is more similar to a limited partner. Ownership common stock carries a certain privilege. Privilege 1, voting rights. Common stock inherent right to vote, and company affairs rights are offered in two forms: statutory voting, cumulative voting. They differ markedly. Statutory voting is voting procedures where it's most common to two, or each holder is given one vote per share. With the election of the director, each share is multiplied by the number of seats to be filled on the board of directors. 3 vacancies were to be filled. The holder of 100 shares would be given 300 votes. However, the votes must be cast in equal amounts for each seat. In this case, 300 votes would actually allocated to be no more than 100 given to any single candidate. Under this voting method, majority of the shareholders would elect all of the directors. Minority holders would have no effective say in the election process. This perhaps is the reason statutory voting is used in the majority of corporations. Cumulative voting is statutory voting. As in statutory voting, the shareholder of the corporation using cumulative voting method is given one vote per share multiplied by the number of the vacancies to be filled on the board of the directors. However, the procedure of the vote shall be all cast for one candidate. As in the example above, a holder of 100 shares would have 300 votes. He could choose to cast all these votes for one candidate. The possible result could be the minority of the share owners would be obtain representation on the board. They might ignore the 3 management choices and instead make their own nomination. By concentration, all of their voting strength in the candidate that might outvote one of the other 3. Although this possibility exists, it doesn't even often occur, since minority groups seldom band together to accomplish a purpose Common stockholders, though entitled to vote, may surrender with a limited number of ways. They might choose not to vote, just as an American citizen might opt to stay home on election day. More commonly, shareholders surrender their vote through a proxy or voting trust. A proxy is a short-term surrendering voting rights, usually just one meeting. Under the law, publicly held corporations must supply shareholders with a proxy which is comparable to an absentee ballot in a political election. Well, before the meeting, the holder is sent with a proxy which contains all of the matters to be voted upon, including elections of the board of directors. The owner makes his choice and votes for it against this issue. Proxy is returned and the votes cast as directed. The votes are cast by someone other than a shareholder that constitutes surrender of the direct voting rights. Although the owner's voice is heard in the determination of the issue, proxies prevent potential abuse by corporations which could hold shareholders' meetings on a short notice in some remote location, as few holders but likely to attend. A management group would control all corporate decisions without opposition. Voting trust is the long-term surrendering of the voting rights. Perhaps for many years, is often the rise of the corporation experienced financial difficulty. The management might contact shareholders and request surrender of the right to vote. If agreed, the votes would be placed in the trust voted for the named trustees. This would enable the corporation to make the rapid decisions, perhaps improve the corporate future. Voting trusts have been used by corporations that wish to retain family control. Family would own the voting shares other than the shareholders. Often the majority would of the voting trust certificate. The voting trust certificate has all of the privileges of the common stock ownership except voting rights. As voting is a rarely major factor in corporate affairs, the market value of the voting trust certificate seldom varies greatly from common shares. An unusual event such as a proxy contest for control of the company, however, the value of the voting trust may be the key factor in market price of the share. Privilege 2, right to transfer shares. With a few exemptions, a common shareholder has the right to transfer shares to someone else without permission of the corporation. Thus, he can sell and sign, make gifts of his holdings without restriction. There are occasions when the shareholder might voluntarily agree not to transfer shares for a short period. This often occurs when the shares are received as an employment benefit or as a reward of achievement. Privilege 3, access to the corporate books and records. The shareholder has the right to examine the book and records of the corporation. Since the shareholder is part of the enterprise, is quite logical. Publicly held companies are required to make reports to shareholders on a regular basis. In addition, Securities and Exchange Commission requires more detailed information to be filed within them by the corporations. As this information is available to the public, there is seldom a need of the shareholder to enforce access corporate books in the non-public corporations. However, no such filing requirements exist. Common stockholder may have the employee legal procedures to claim his right to this information. Obviously, a corporation would not be required to disclose information that is confidential and might work to the disadvantage of its business. Privilege 4, dividends when declared. The payment of the dividends by a corporation is effective with award over the owners. There is no requirement to pay the dividends. However, if the dividend is declared, it must be all shareholders proportional to their own interest. The company cannot prejudice of the group of the owners by withholding payment, with limiting payment to chosen few. Note that on corporate balance sheet, the dividends, unlike bond interests, are not carried out as current liability. They become such only at the time they are declared until the day of payment. Privilege 5, preemptive rights. Preemptive rights grant common stockholders the first right to subscribe additional stock, but the privilege is not inherent with the voting rights and is, in fact, rather unusual in today's investment climate. Some companies and primary public utilities grant them a means of raising additional capital for the current stake shareholder. The use of preemptive rights have declined sharply in the recent years, but they do exist in an investment product. Purpose rights have been prevent common stockholders to have the percentage of ownership of the corporation diluted without equity. And shareholder in the corporation owns 10% of the outstanding stock. No additional shares could be issued unless he was offered the first privilege to purchase 10% of the new shares. And publicly traded issues, these rights generally give the holder the opportunity to purchase new shares at a price below the current market value. Thus, the rights would have the intrinsic value of their own. Example, XYZ Corporation currently had 4 million shares outstanding. Wish it would offer an additional 1 million shares through the rights offering the current holders. Therefore, the stockholder would be allowed to purchase 1 additional shares each 4 shares presently held. Assume May Smith owns 400 shares of XYZ Corporation common stock. She would receive 400 rights to subscribe and would be entitled to subscribe to an additional 100 additional shares. If the current market price of XYZ is $40 per share, the subscription price would be $32.50. The rights would have been the terminal value. At the time of the original announcement, market price stock at $40 would include the right to buy additional shares. Should one purchase a share at $40, he would receive the share plus one preemptive right. Mrs. Smith might wish now to know the theoretical value of her rights in order to determine her course of action. It's right, the sufficient value that she may like to sell them, apply the proceeds to some other purpose. Theoretical value of a right when stock trading is trading with the rights and income rights determined by the following formula. Premium indicates the dollar amount of the market price and the stock trading above subscription price. Premium of $7.50 or $40 market price minus $32.50 subscription price. R is the ratio, indicates the number of the rights required subscription to each additional share. As 4 is rights required for new share, the rate is is 4. The ratio as 4 rights are required to each new share, the ratio is 4. The ratio would add 1, reflecting the fact that each share purchased would also grant the buyer 1 right toward purchase of an additional share. The addition negates the value of the rights part market value of the stock. Our calculation would be as follows. Premium $7.50 over the ratio plus 1 would give you 5 or $1.50. For each right, the theoretical value is $1.50. Mrs. Smith has 400 rights, which 400 rights, which upon sale could bring approximately $600. Her decision to subscribe or sell can now be made no more than factual basis. At later date, X, Y, and Z stock will begin to trade times XR rights. XR. This means if the market price of the stock is no longer included in the preemptive right, it changes our method of computing the value of the right. As there's no large right to negotiate, it would no longer be necessary to add 1 to the ratio. Thus, the formula would be premium over ratio. Using the value of the previous example of the right XYZ trading at XR, the trading X rates without rights would be $1.88. Traders who engage market price known as arbitrage may find the opportunity to profit by use of rights. The aim of the arbitrager is to find what the difference of the market would prove to him and with a gain. Upon locating the difference, simultaneously buys one security in one market and sells the same security or exchange one in the same different market. For example, AT&T Corporation stock was traded at $18.74 per share on the New York Stock Exchange. In the same moment it was selling at $19 per share on the Boston Stock Exchange. The arbitrator would simultaneously buy in New York and sell in Boston, achieving the 26-cent per share profit excluding expenses. With the rights to use the example, the arbitrage would first determine the true value of the rights at $1.88, and should the rights be selling below the level as say $1.50, the arbitrage would proceed as follows. Purchase 4 rights and sell 1 share for the stock short. This result would be a profit of $1.50. 4 rights would cost $6. The subscription would be made at $32.50. Total cost of 1 share would be $38.50. The short sale of the share would have been made at $40, yielding a gross profit of $1.50 per share. In later chapters, we will discuss arbitrage with other investment vehicles such as the American Depository Receipts, convertible preferred stock, convertible bonds. Their potential example, the market technique, is virtually unlimited. Arbitrary implied that the net profit at the time of the trade simultaneously completed. Obviously, opportunities for the read the profit so easily difficult to discover. Most arbitrage contain a risk and generally referred to risk arbitrage of the topic discussed later. Warrants grant the holder of the privilege to subscribe to the common stock of the corporation. Preemptive rights of the warning exercisable for a warrant is exercisable for a long period of time, often 10 or more years. The data issues somewhat of the perpetual time factor makes a warrant an attractive vehicle for the potential capital gains. Generally, a warrant issued with the conjunction with some of the other security and package include a unit. For example, the March 19, 2002 Chiquita Brands International issued $250 million of notes maturing March 5, 2009, bearing interest to March 9, 2002 at $10.56% annum. Warrants were attached so-called sweetener to attract the note of the buyer. The warrantors entitled the bill holder to purchase 1 share of common stock at a price of $19.23 per share through March 19, 2009. At the time of the writing, Chiquita Brands International Incorporated common stock was selling at $19.93. A warrant was at $6. The value of the warrant is determined on two factors: intrinsic value, time value. Thus, warrant entitled the holder to purchase one share of common stock at $9.23 of the common stock selling at $9.63. So the intrinsic value would be 40 cents, and the difference of $30.42 of the time value the buyer would pay. The exemption of the common stock will rise during the remaining lifetime of the warrant. In general, similar premium value of the security options discussed later in the chapter. However, the warrants have much longer life options and would command a higher premium. American depository receipts. American depository receipts were developed many years ago when American investors became interested in securities of foreign, particularly European corporations. With the economic recovery at the beginning of the end of the World War II, the interest of foreign investments increased markedly. In the 1970s and early 1980s, expanded and included Japanese corporations. American depository receipts solve the problem that existed foreign investment by Americans. For example, if one wished to purchase shares of Royal Dutch Petroleum, they need to have shares sent to Holland. The transfer would be most inconvenient. Time delays would certainly inhibit the trading, and interest would wane. By using American depository receipt, the problem is avoided. Foreign shares are deposited in an American bank of the nation of issue. The bank of the issue of the American depository receipts in the United States that are tradable, transferring without traveling overseas. American depository receipts often require one foreign share, but there is no requirement that there be the ratio. Often the American depository receipts equals more or less than one foreign share. Applicable to the addition should be understood by the investor. For instance, Japanese share prices usually allowed by the design, stock splits, etc. Therefore, American depository receipts in Japanese companies often represent 10 shares underlying foreign security. In recent years, trading has begun in European depository receipts. There are receipts for these are receipts of American securities that are issued and traded in Europe, giving the European investors more convenience in managing the portfolio of securities of American corporations. American depository receipts hold generally receivable privileged common stock ownership with the dividend voting rights. In some cases, they are not granted preemptive rights to subscribe to additional securities. If the company issues right with the bank holding underlying foreign security sells with the right and credits of the American depository receipt holder with a proportional amount of the proceeds. Preferred stock. Preferred stock is comparable to common stock, both representing the equity of the ownership of the corporation. There ends with the similarity of the difference between the two classes of equity are threefold: voting rights, dividend priority, and rights of liquidation. Voting rights. Generally, preferred stock does not vote. All voting power is held with the common stock holder. The preferred stock is comparable to limited partnership, although limited partnership capable or make a capital contribution to the organization. Only the general partners vote. Voting preferred does not exist, but the exemption rather than the rule. Dividend priority. Dividend on the preferred stock must be prepared before the dividend can be common in the stock, but there is no assurance of the private dividend will be paid. Does provide priority over the common. Feature generally makes prefer to make a conservative investment in favor of the certain investors. All since bonds are the debt instrument that take priority over all the stock provide even more safe to do than preferreds. One might question any of the investor purchase preferred stock when bonds of the corporation would outwardly seem more attractive. The possible return on the preferred stock is greater than on a bond. Thus provides better investment opportunity. Additional, under the Internal Revenue Code, corporations may exclude with the tax calculation a large portion of the dividends. Currently, 70% of the corporation owns less than 29% of the issue. If more than 20% of the 80% is retained, the exclusion is not available to the interest of the corporate bonds, and thus granting to the preferred stock investor is much higher than after-tax yields. Dividends on preferreds, unlike the dividend of the common stocks, are usually fixed. Often the dividend of the percentage of the par value. For instance, with a consolidated Edison, $25 per share, 12% preferred stock would have a $3 annual dividend, or 12% of $25 paid when the quarterly amounts of 75 cents. Even the fortune of the company would improve sharply, but the dividends would remain shaped. On the other hand, with the variable dividend with the common stocks could increase for the good times, perhaps leading with a higher market price of the shares. Conversely, in poor earnings periods, for dividend must be paid before the common dividend, which could be decreased or even eliminated. Dividends on preferred stock are usually cumulative, with the dividends not paid in one period accumulate must be paid before anything is paid on the common stock. For example, the For example, should there be 12% of the $25 par preferred mentioned earlier to no receive the dividends 3 consecutive years, you would be in areas of $9 per share. The amount plus an additional dividends due would have to be paid in full before anything could be paid in common stock. Over no way guarantees pay is preferred dividend, but it does give it an additional priority over the common stocks. Careful investors often over the years have profited generally with the purchasing preferred stock of the large amount of the dividends and in their arrears. Currently forecasting in terms of the better business than the company were able to benefit the arrears with a later paid. Additional market value of the preferred stock would increase as their arrears vanish, reflecting improved financial stability of the corporation. Some preferred dividends of the non-cumulative denied the holder aforementioned advantages. Carefully scrutiny of the term's most important function of the investor and his representative. Participating preferred. Small number of the preferred stocks participating preferreds that give the holder possibility of receiving the dividends greater than the stated amount, generally used in making the preferred stock more attractive to potential investors. If, for example, 12% of the $100 par preferred particularly interesting an investor at the time the issuing corporation wishes to make an offering, it might sweeten it up by adding a dividend participant to the security of the sweetener. Might be passed based on a dividend increase to the holder of the common stock. In this case, 12% of the 100% par preferred would stay with the dividends of the common stock would exceed $4 per year, but the participating preferred holders would share in that excess. Thus, in some of the future common stockholders receive $6 in dividends, but the participating preferred would receive $14. 12 plus $2 excess characteristic would be preferred more desirable holding for many investors. Participating preferred stock rare has been successful to make new offerings more attractive than not, unlike an additional warrant offers some of the other securities that I mentioned earlier. In either case, the warrant participating clause give it an investment value, increase issues ability to raise necessary capital. Alright, right of liquidation. Should a corporation liquidate, preferred holders would right of the payment prior to the common stockholders. It would be known of a particular privilege seldom of the great value. Corporations do not generally liquidate their business. If they're going well, liquidations are more likely to be caused with a business problem. Liquidation process, all creditors, including bondholders, must be paid before stockholders. There's seldom anything left of these equity owners. However, after creditors have been paid, should assets remain, the distribution of the stockholder preferred come first. The preferred stockholder must receive the par value stock of $100 in or previous example before the common shareholder received any payment will not overlook the privilege of preferred stock ownership, in most cases of limited importance. Convertible preferred. Convertible preferred is one of the exchange with another security. In most cases, of the common stock, same issuing company. Rare instance of the exchange may be some of the other security with a different type of the preferred stock for shares of some subsidiary company. Conversion privileges make these shares a breed par, holding only a preferred share with the aforementioned principles, but can understand understated terms and conditions. Exchange of the common stock with those should value of the common stock to creep with the sum of the future of the convertible preferred holders will share in that gain. Issuing company standpoint with the convertible preferred shares represent the saving the required dividend payments. At the same point, the market might demand the issue of the non-convertible preferred stock with a dividend payment of $15 per value, while convertible preferred might be paying perhaps only 10% of the par value. The investor accepts the lower return of the shares purchase, given the possibility of appreciation based on performance of the common stock. When first issued, convertible preferreds or convertibles in common are at a price higher than the current market price. The conversion benefit of the demonstrated some future time should be the price of the common increase. Example: Acme Button Corporation issues 10% of the $100 par convertible preferred stock, allows the holder to exchange with the common stock at $50 per share. But this means the holder exchanges one share of the preferred to two shares common, which is determined by the dividing the par $100 conversion price. Par value over conversion price, 100 over 50, 2 shares. At the time issue of the common stock, the Acme Button Corporation may be at $40 per share, given no immediate intrinsic value. However, in the future, value may increase dramatically should Acme Button Company trade at $54.50 per share. This would be the equivalent of the preferred $54.50 times 2, which is the convertible share at $109. And convertible shares equivalent to 2 common shares of the intrinsically preferred stock was worth twice of the common price of $54.50 times 2. Calculation given is known as the parity. Parity is the price for the net of the profit or loss would result from a conversion. In example, if preferred was trading at $109 per share, holder converted it for 2 shares of common trading at $54.50. The value would be the same at $109. Example, convertible preferred was trading in market at $142.50 per share would be the parity of the common stock. The answer would be $71.25. Would simply divide the price preferred with 142 by 2, as each preferred exchange is 2 common preferred price over the conversion ratio. Quietly logical convertible securities traded in price of the above parity. Investors pay the additional amount with the receive the conversion privilege that may later pay the greater reward. They also receive the security preferred stock with the priorities over the common stock of the previously discussed. Acme Button Corporation convertible preferred trading at $90 per share with the common stock trading price for the 10% below parity, which market price for the common stock. The answer would be $40.50. The answer question is the most simply with the must be first determine the parity common preferred price over the conversion $45. Trading on the common price of $45 per share are told, however, the common trades at 10% below parity are left over the easy calculation. $45 times 10% is $4.50. So $45 minus $4.50 would be $40.50. We take 10% of the parity price of $45, subtract that from the price to give us the current price of $40.50. Now we will question in the other direction. Acme common stock is trading at $57.50 per share. Convertible preferred is trading 20% above parity, which the price is preferred at $130.8 per share. Again, we must first compute the parity of the preferred exchange for the 2 shares of the common stock. Therefore, for the common trading at $57.50 parity with $115.57 common price times 2, the conversion ratio equals $115 parity for preferred. We are told preferred actually trades at 20% above parity. Thus, one answers 115 times 20 is $23, and 115 plus $23 is $138. $23, which the preferred trades above parity, is called the conversion premium. A market technique opposite of the arbitrage is called the reverse hedge. Here, the trader will feel spread between the common and convertible preferred is to the great with the non-convertible common and sell short convertible preferred. Example, with the ABC Corporation, 8% of the preferred exchangeable for the common stock at $25 per share. Each share of the preferred, but therefore, the exchangeable for 4 shares of common, 100 divided by 25 preferred stock is trading at $120, which means the parity of the common is $30. If it's 120 divided by 4, non-convertible common would generally trade below parity. Trader with the situation might conclude that the common should be about 10% below the parity, $27 per share, $30 less than 10%. Assuming the common stock is trading at $21 per share, but the trader is correct with the common share rises to 27 or convertible preferred should decline to bring spread it into line. How he therefore does the reverse of the two arbitrage and shorts the preferred and buys the common. The trader will profit on the short position if the preferred declines or will profit on his long position when the common goes up. A reverse header is very dangerous, and there is no limit to the possible loss of the short position. Should the trader's calculation prove wrong, we'll look for the related matters of the other related discussion arbitrage. Alright, callable preferred. Many preferred stock, particularly convertible preferreds, contain a call feature for the entitles the issue of the repurchase stock at a fixed price of the future. Should the corporation exercise the right to call for the holder may surrender the share of the agreement that was part of the original issuance of the stock. Price Acme Button Corporation 10% of the 100 par convertible preferred as a call feature that allowed for the issuing corporation to repurchase the stock under the following terms from the time of the issuance. Year 1 or 5 non-callable, year 106, year 6 108, year 7 106, year 108 104, year 9 102, year 10 and 9 100. There is the 6 year after the issue for the corporation called the shares of $108 per share. This would save the dividend payments and could provide valuable use of the internal generated funds. And convertible preferreds, as for a feature of them, may also be led to what is known as a forced conversion. Assuming the preferred is convertible at $50 share, 2 shares equal 100 par at $50 conversion. Should common stock at one point trading in the market at $61 per share, parity preferred would be $122 per share with a 61 times 22. 61 times 2. If the preferred were callable at 108 per share with the corporation exercise of the privilege, the holder would be necessary to convert with the common. Failure to do this would mean surrendering shares to the call price of $108, then could exchange with the common shares currently valued at $122 for its conversion. We'll discuss and again in our study of convertible bonds, but principle is consistent, and an investor would convert in these cases to avoid loss of value that would result in permitted the securities to be called away from him. Corporate bonds. A bond is an instrument of the debt with representing a loan made over the corporation. Bonds issued for the corporation fall into the many categories based on the difference among them and the security behind the borrowing. When the investor buys a bond, she is effectively lending money with the corporation. She will be paid an interest agreed the rate until the maturity. Her concern would be in the corporation ability to pay the interest to pay the principal amount, but the maturity interest must, like dividends on the stock obligation of the corporation failure to make the payment she leads on the schedule leads to default of the bondholders would be entitled to the security pledged by the corporation to obtain satisfaction of the debt. The security is what distinguishes one type of the corporate bond from another. In later section, we'll be able to discuss debt instruments over the issued by the U.S. government and government agencies as well as municipalities, but at this point, we're going to direct our attention to the corporate bonds. Corporate bonds are often categories of money market instrument or capital market instruments. Capital market generally describe the debt instruments maturing more than 1 year from time of the issuance, whereas money markets include short-term debt maturing 1 year or less for the date of issuances. Capital markets. Long-term corporate bonds should be divided in a number of any number of the type 6 categories, but recognize many of the future divisions can be made. We will, however, discuss the detailed current form issue. Mortgage bond. A mortgage bond issued for the debt secured by the real property owned by the issuing corporation. Just an individual may purchase a home and borrow the money with the bank pledging as a home and secured with many of the corporation borrow that have been invested with the real property of the corporation secured with the debt. Should the corporation fail to pay as agreed to pledge, property could be used to satisfy all of the part of the debt. For example, the Consolidated Edison may borrow $100 million capital improvement, specifically certain utility obligation borrowing allowed to the foreclosure payment of the lenders. Mortgage bonders issue with a variety of the principal among these are open-ended and closed-ended mortgage. Open-ended mortgage property used to secure the loan can be used to secure later loan at the equaling rate. If $100 million of Con Edison bond was open-ended mortgage, that the corporation could later borrow additional money pledging on the same property for the collateral for investor purchasing. The second issue that would rank equally with those purchasing in the first event of the default. Obviously, the buyer must take care of the receipt of the property pledge is more sufficient to cover all possibilities. One, open-ended mortgage bonds can be normally issued only by corporation higher credit standing. Closed-end mortgage, on the other hand, prohibits the borrower of the pledging security for the second time equal rank, thus the lender knows that the pledge of the real property will be used to solely satisfy his claim in the event of a default, but this would not preclude the borrower from pledging property with a subordinate basis, in which case the buyer in the second issue would have the claim only against the assets of the remainder of the initial lenders have been satisfied. Other mortgage bonds are issued with the Consolidated General Mortgage. In this case, the issuing corporation does not specify the items of the property will serve as the collateral, but of the pledges all real property owned and secured with the mortgage. Yet they are in effect in the form of the open-ended mortgage. Collateral trust certificate. Collateral trust certificate is an instrument of debt pledging of the security stack with the and/or bonds of the corporation compares to an end of one of the personal financial dealings and quite directly into the need that some of the financial project with your own where you would take it and share with the motors stock to a bank and secure the debt with the default of the bank who sell its pledge stock to the obtained satisfaction. Similar corporation may issue bonds placing the trust certificate in corporation P. Trustee generally bank and hold of the collateral unit and repayment to the default occur with the trustee sell with the security to protect with the bondholder. The bonds usually commonly contain provisions that increasing collateral should market values decrease for the bonding holder is therefore reasonable securing against loss. Collateral trust certificates are not common form of borrowing, although many such of the issue that do exist. Shell Oil and Pasture for the common vehicle for the railroad industry, other large railroad, New York Central, who own subsidiary railroad, Michigan Central, the parent would borrow money using security subsidiary to secure the loan. With the vast change of the curve for the railroad financing, we will sell less of this interesting form of the debt security. Debenture of the instrument of the old debt secured with the instrument of the debt secured with the promise of the payment of the issuing corporation. No specific security is pledged and true with the other type of the corporate debt. Corporation with a high credit rating would have no trouble issuing debentures, investors would have the advantage of the issuer's ability to pay. Should the default occur with the debenture of the holders become the general creditors and have claim to claim to any asset not pledged to secure the corporate debt. Debentures are often subordinate to other claims. Subordinate debenture holder would have the last creditor to pay the event of the corporate dissolution. The credit for the standing of the issue of the primary importance. Virtually all convertible bonds are issued as debenture of the issuing corporation gives the bondholder the right to exchange the bond into a common stock. They available the privileges making it unnecessary to supply any fixed collateral for the loan. Guaranteed bond. There are no specific type of debt, but the guaranteed bonds have the unique feature they are issued one corporation, but guaranteed in whole and part by some other corporation. So, suppose, for example, the small company ABC Electrical Wire Corporation supplies some of the items needed for some of the larger companies, so let's say General Electric, with a limited responsibility solely for the payment of interest and solely payments for the principal at maturity. In many of the case for the guarantee is both the principal and interest given to the investor of the same security she would have the receiver the trust had she purchased bond with the corporation making the guarantee. The guaranteed bonds are rare but have been provided access for the credit markets to make corporations that would enact independently, finding the doors closed to them. Equipment trust certificate. An equipment trust certificate instrument the debt pledging with the security of the actual equipment used for the corporation operation over the business forming the financing most of the often used by railroads pledged for the actual cars operated over the rail system. Other than the industry, notably airlines, trucking corporations may also issue the type of the bond when the loans are in trust holders until the repayment makes interest the distribution of the bondholder during the return of the loan. Upon repayment of the majority trustee transfer title of the equipment back to the railroad or other issue because of the agreement contained with the provision maintenance insurance of the replacement of the collateral. The securities are considered to be high investment quality. Equipment trust certificates are often feature with a unique amount among certain corporate bonds that they are usually issued with serial form of the portion so that issues mature with the different dates. Generally, corporate bonds are issued in term of the form of the entire issue matures on the same date. Thus, Chesapeake, Ohio borrows $30 million offering equipment trust certificate, and the issue might be structured at $2 million of the debt would be paid in each of the next 15 years. The amount paid each year would need to be equal. Often, issuers of the balloon form of the repayment, small amounts are repaid for the earlier years and the largest amount repaid in later years. This form of the issuance is given investors latitude to select the various maturities of the offers which best suit the financial planning needs. Income bond and adjustment bond. The income bond sometimes refers to the adjustment bond not issued for the method of obtaining original financing, but they're issued with the exchange of the outstanding debt with the corporation experiencing financial problems. Suppose XYZ Corporation has outstanding issue with 6% debentures. Should the corporation default on the payment of the interest, the bondholders could enforce a bankruptcy. However, the corporate assets were minimal, but the bondholders would receive little satisfaction. In some cases, the corporation seemed possible recovery if it remained in business and relieved the requirement to pay for the semi-annual interest on the debt, but many of the ends of the offer exchange with the issue for the XYZ 8% of the income bond for XYZ 6% debentures. Should the debenture holder agree with the exchange would now own a bond with a higher rate of the interest should conditions later allow for the corporation to resume interest payment. The key feature for the income bond is that the interest must be paid on the insufficient money for the earned for the issuer of the issue. The earner falls short with no obligation paid, but the bonder will have no recourse but to wait and hope for the better day. But the company be unable to pay for the period of years the bonder receiving no return on the investment. However, if a banner year occurs in the future for the corporation may distribute the equivalent number of the previous year's payments. The interest on the income bond is payable only if earned to the extent the earned. Therefore, years may pass with no payments of the bondholders followed by the year of the large distribution. Since the holders exchange the bond with a higher interest rate with the eventually total prepayment of the increased return. However, the corporate issuers are financially troubled and happy endings are less than usual. Some cases the bondholder exchanges with his debt with an income bond, but not only to receive the higher stated interest rate with 8% versus 6%, but may receive the greater principal amount with the encouraged exchange with the bondholder may offer $1,100 face amount for the income bond for $1,000 debenture. Bonds generally traded with the plus accrued interest for the indicate the buyer over the bond pays the seller amount of the interest to which the seller is entitled, but generally with the pay the interest twice a year with the one purchase A bond in September that pays interest on January 1st and July 1st. The buyer pays an agreed price, perhaps 98% of the accrued interest from the previous July 1st. The interest refunded with the next interest repayment on January 1st. Bond price is expressed in percentage of the face value. By cover the face value is the bond $100,000 price for the 98 indicates $980 or 98% 1,000. Addition with the buyer with the paragraph above that pays the interest of the seller months of the July and August as well for the appropriate portion of September. Following January, the buyer proceed with his full 6-month interest from the corporation repayment repays him on about the advance of the time of the purchase, gives him the interest due for the period of the bond as the bondholder. Interest on corporate bonds and municipal bonds are computed with using a 30-day payment method and a 360-day year. For example, the very interesting computation will be funded in the municipality section tax income bonds. However, the exemption of the general rule, the bonds are traded flat, which means they are no accrued interest with the adding of the price paid by the buyer. Should the bond make interest payment to the holder with the date receive the entire amount distributed to the only other bond that had trade flat in those defaults or interest payment and default interest payments, a buyer would be foolish to pay interest to the seller with no payment by the issuer anticipated. Although interest is normally a factor of the bond transaction, it can be important with the consideration bonds trading flat should be at 8% of the income bond with a semi-annual payment. A holder would receive $40 per $1,000 bond. At the point the bond equals $10 per 1% of the $1,000, the payment that could bond rates for the payment due nears the fall when interest has been distributed. Flat bonds trade X interest, just stocks that pay dividends X dividends. On the first day of the purchase, they would not entitle to the coming payment, but note the difference between the point and the base point with the point beyond it with $10 a point base point with 10%, 10 cents, which is 10 hundredths. 10,000ths of a percent of 1,000. Trusted Indenture Act of 1939, indenture contract between the issuing corporation borrower with the investor purchasing of the bond and the lender that spells out the detail of the covering loan includes the such items: interest rate, maturity date, call feature of the refusing provisions, term of the conversions, if any, and all other considerations of the borrowing. The indenture is printed on the face of the bond. The certificate on the Trust Indenture Act, the independent trustees, usually a bank and appointed with the protect of the purchaser of the debt, with the trustees oversee agreement indenture to secure the rights of the bondholder. Retirement of the debt. One issuer of the has offered the debt security with a number of the ways in which the debt can be retired should the bond be issued July 1st, 2004, carrying a 20-year maturity. Then on July 1st, 2024, company would be required to pay back the bondholder with the redemption after the maturity occurs if the bond had reached agreed date. This redemption maturity occurs after the bond has reached the agreed day of the repayment. However, there are 4 ways which an issuer may retire debt security prior to the maturity. Callable bonds. Call feature that entitled with the issue with the repurchase of the bond prior to the maturity under the terms of which we set at all the time of the issue. For example, June 2004, Florida Power Light Corporation offered an issue with $100 million first mortgage bonds, 5% due to June 1st, 2034. Bond might allow for a call with the corporation prior to the maturity. General over the period of 5 to 10 years, during the bonds may not be called to protect the purchaser from losing his investment should the interest rate decline. Perhaps Florida Power and Light may carry a scheduling like the following: years 1 and 5 not callable, year 6 114, year 7 113, year 8 112. Call price for the decline each year, eventually reaching $100 par, which means 100% of the face value. Bonds cannot be called below, as would be improper to require the holder $1,000 bond to an involuntary accept less than face value note. Should the market factors cause the bonds to traded below $100, the corporation could consider buying them back in an open market rather than exercising the call. And the 7th year after issue of the call can be made for the bonds at $1,130 per $1,000, and the holder would be required to deliver according to the agreement. And the Florida Power and Light might decide to call the entire $100 million, but just proportionate over the issue. And in this case, the bonds to be called will be determined by random selection and holders notified. Refunding. A refunding is a sale of the new issue bonds where the proceeds used to retire the outstanding issue. The corporation may issue 8% of the debenture of the issue of so many years ago. Should current interest rates allow the company to issue bonds within 60% coupon, they might elect to refund the older issue. Replacing the 8% bond with requiring only the payment of the 6% of the company save with the 2% each year on this issue for the whole face amount of $100 million. This represents with a $2 million annual savings. Corporation may also form the refunding to pay for the bonds of the maturity. Perhaps the company does not have sufficient capital to meet the payment of the maturing issue. They might sell a new issue of the same face value using proceeds to redeem the maturing bonds and refunding the corporation does not receive it in cash. The proceeds of the sale are used to retire the outstanding debts. In order for the corporation to refund its issue, the term of the refunding must have been included in an indenture. Refunding terms are usually the same as those permitting bonds to be called. Perhaps indentures stated as year 1 through 5, no callable, 6, 114, 7, and 113, year 8, 112. This should be the corporation elect to refund the outstanding debt 8 years after issue. That would have to pay the bond of $1,120 or 112% of $1,000 for each $1,000 face amount bond that was refunded. The interest saved might make the payment at 12% of the premium advantage for the corporation. The sinking fund. The term sinking fund of the writer itself is descriptive. The corporation agreed to set up a fund with the strength of the bond issue. The $100 million issue maturing 20 years might carry the $1 million annual sinking fund. This would mean that each year the corporation would deposit $1 million into the fund, which would be used to pre-purchase the bonds in the open market. Since sinking funds tend to increase the attractiveness of the remaining bonds. Using, for example, each year there would be $1 million less for the debt outstanding, but this would decrease the amount of the interest cost of the corporation, reduce $1 million each year. The amount would be paid off by the corporation. Maturity sinking the funds terms year vary. Should there be carefully studied by the investor, since even the 100% sinker, which means that all the bonds were retired by a sinking fund prior to the maturity. Some case bonds may be called with the sinking fund by the sinking fund. This takes away from the bonding holder with the right to choose the bond called with the described earlier. With the holder must surrender them. With the sinking fund operates in the open market, the bonder can elect to retain the bonds should such action be more advantageous. Or conversion. Corporation issue for the convertible bond will frequently set for the bonds retired prior to the maturity. Convertible bonds give it and the holder the right to exchange the convertible bonds as some of the other security. Even the common stock, same corporation. Suppose the corporation issue for the 6% convertible debenture that allows the holder to exchange the bonds for common stock at the $25 per share. That means the holder with the option exchange with the bonds for the 40 share for the common stock with the $1,000 face value with the bond dividend and with the conversion price $25 per share. At the same point in time when the common stock is paid, paying the dividend of $4 per share annually, with the bondholder might convert with the bond into 40 shares, but the stock receive the $160 per year dividends of $4 per share at 40 shares with a far greater than $60 interest, 6% interest on 1,000 had been receiving on the bond unconverted with the bond returned, relieving the corporation interest payment, the obligation, and payment in the face of the maturity. Featuring the one reason why corporations issue convertible bonds, they carry the possibility of being retired prior to the maturity, require the lower interest payment in the issue, but they might have to pay 8%. Issuing non-convertible bond, convertible bond might be necessity payment in 6% annual. Although convertible bonds are converted option holder to increase the income more often the exchange caused by the forced conversion. For example, the bonds mentioned above with the convertible with common stock $25 per share, which opposed with the common stock with the trading market at $36 per share. The parity with the bond would be $140 at $1,440 for the determining multiplying the price by the stock of $36 by the number of the share of which the bond is converted with $40 to 4, which is 40. The stock is trading at $36 per share with each $1,000 bond exchange with the stock valued at $1,440 or $36 at 40 shares. Suppose, however, the bond was also callable at $106 or $1,060 should the issuer call the bonds if the price of the bondholder would force to convert less than the surrender bonds worth at $1,440 for the call price at $1,060. Parity is the price at which neither a profit nor a loss would result from the conversion. Using the same bond with the previous example, determine parity will give it either the current price of the stock or the current price of the bond. Given the stock prices, simply multiply the price by the number of shares into which the bond is convertible, and then show the stock price and parity of the bond. Note the number of shares into the bond convertible determined by the dividing face value bond 1,000 by the stated conversion price. This, if we were told that bonds is convertible in the stock at $50 per share, it would be divided into 1,000 by the $50 price, and the fine with the bond was convertible into 20 shares of stock, 1,000 divided into $50 conversion price. If we were given the market price of the bond, what the bill would be to determine the parity with the stock with the dividend price with the number of shares is convertible. Using the original example, the $1,000 bond convertible at $25 per share, we now recommend the exchange 40 shares of common stock, 1,000 divided by 25. After meeting determination, can easily determine the parity price of the stock, which is given the market price of the bond, with a simple divide the bond price for the number of shares which is convertible. So with $800 plus divided by 40 shares, $20 shares, and then it shows the 20, 25, 30, and 32 and $30, $4 per share parity of common stock at the bond price. Bonds can be retired prior to the maturity through 1. Call, 2. Refund, 3. Sinking fund, 4. Conversion. It's also possible that the corporation might repurchase its bonds on the open market, might feel that the market price of its bond is low if it could use the excess corporate bond funds to repurchase the debt, although it's not required to do so. The result would be, of course, the retirement of death. Answer 1, chapter examination, and then examination questions. Chapter 1 answers. Chapter 2, U.S. Government Agency Securities.